think all the administration I interact with, wow, CAPT's pretty specific or pretty rigorous. And I always say, yep, but that means we're going to have a great quality program. And that means when you go and get physical therapy care as the greater public, that we're having high standards. And so it's good for us as a profession. It's a little laborious when you're working on this, but also it does give assurance to students if they're following through the process and you keep getting the green light and moving through the process, like in initial accreditation or continuing up with accreditation, that students know they're going to have a program that will meet these high standards.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the PTA Plus podcast. I'm Katie Sutton, your host. Are you a PTA who's ever thought about going back to DPT school? And you're thinking to yourself, that seems like a lot of time, seems like a lot of energy. It doesn't seem like there's a great pathway for me to get there. I have to get my bachelor's degree. I mean, it's going to take years and years. Are all of these things that you've thought about as a physical therapist assistant? Like if it was just a little bit easier, you might take that step. Well, today's episode is just for you if you are somebody who's been considering that. Today's guest is Erin Forekleas from the New England Institute of Technology in Rhode Island. She's going to tell us all about, she is the program director, and she's going to tell us all about their new PTA to DPT Bridge program and how this might be the pathway for you. 27 months, 7 immersive labs, hybrid program. Oh, and by the way, you can get your bachelor's degree on the way there. So if this is something you've been thinking about, you're not going to want to miss today's episode. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the PTA Plus podcast. I'm Katie Sutton, your host. Today, I have our guest, Erin Forekleas. Am I saying it correct? Okay, good. I've been practicing over the last week or so. You see, Erin and I, we tried to do a podcast last week, and we had some tech issues. This was the second time I've had some tech issues in the last couple of weeks. So I'm doing a lot of repeat episodes. I shouldn't say repeat, but I'm getting to meet all of my guests multiple times, and that's fun because then we just have more time to get to know each other and everything. So welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on. You are, yes, of course, you are the program director for a brand new Bridge program. This is the PTA to DPT Bridge program. And let me make sure I get this right, at the New England Institute of Technology. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. Good. See, I'm getting all of my words right.
It's perfect.
That's a pretty good day for me if I can get all of my words correct. So this episode in particular is going to be really helpful for PTAs who are thinking about advancing their degree or their career, but they're not really sure how to do it in a time efficient manner. So we're going to kind of address some of those things in this episode, but also something that I've gotten from our conversations between you and I recently is just if you are a PTA who's wanting to advance your degree, but you're a little nervous about going into a program that's traditional and you won't be surrounded by people who are kind of at the same stage of life per se. This might be something interesting for PTAs who know that they're going to go into a class full of other PTAs. So we're going to touch base on that a little bit today too. And as a PTA educator myself, I get students all the time who are asking me about advancing their degree. Obviously, going back to DPT school isn't for everybody, but there usually is a handful of students who want to ask some questions about it. And what is the difference between a bridge program and a traditional program? What do those differences look like? What's going to be the best for themselves? And of course, this podcast is all about elevating PTAs. And in some cases, going back to school to become a DPT might be the case or the route for some PTAs. And I recognize that's not for everybody. But so today we're going to talk about your brand new program and how this looks like for a PTA who's obviously a working adult who already has a degree and already has a career. So we're going to kind of break some of that down. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I found your contact information on LinkedIn. I think you had an upcoming open house.
Correct.
Yeah. And I was like, I need to talk to Erin.
Yeah, and we're trying to get the word out. We're the new Bridge program. And some of it's just letting individuals know that we're out there and that this is one of several options, but it's an option worth exploring.
Love LinkedIn. I don't get paid to say that, but
Good.
I can't tell you how many people I've met on LinkedIn that I've had come on the podcast, or I have scheduled to come on the podcast, where they're sharing just like interesting and cool information. And I'm like, these are people that I need in my life and in my network, and I want to talk to them. So it's a great platform if you're trying to kind of, you know, get in there and rub elbows with people. So I highly
Yeah.
recommend get a LinkedIn.
Yeah, I do too. It's a great way to connect to like-minded individuals, and yeah, it's worked out well.
Yeah. Yeah. As a PTA, I can't tell you how many times that I've been as, and just to kind of like set this up a little bit. Yes, I'm a PTA. I have my associate's degree. I have my bachelor's degree in business management. And then I went back for my master's degree in, it's a Master of Liberal Studies. I built it specifically for PTA education. So it has, excuse me, human development in it. It has instructional technology and design in it. So I kind of built that my own thing here. But I never was like, hey, I want to go back to PT school. It wasn't something I wanted to do. I like being a PTA. It's my career. It's who I am. It's what I've built everything around, right? So sometimes it gets exhausting when people say, hey, when are you going to go back and finish your degree and become a real therapist?
Yeah,
Or aren't you almost done with your degree yet or something like that? So, it's kind of like an inside joke as a PTA, that we hear this a lot. So, um, obviously not for everybody, but it is the right path for some people.
exactly.
So, all of these things that we have questions about, like time, money, what does the
Yes.
structure look like? Can I fit this into my life? There's a lot of questions that you have to ask yourself before you take this kind of leap.
It's a big decision. And
Yeah.
definitely, like you said, it's not for every PTA, but for some, and some of the APTA data says upwards of 8 to 10% of PTAs may be looking and choosing to go on to become a DPT
Interesting.
because that's their area of interest or the choice that they've made. But we haven't done a really good job as a profession of linking the two if you do want to go on. So, hence these bridge programs, which I
Yeah.
think are really important.
It's very interesting that you say that. I just had an episode released back in April or May, I think, where we talked a little bit about some of the nitty gritty details about why aren't we doing a better job of bridging.
Yes.
We talk about bridge programs, but sometimes I feel like we don't do a great job of bridging that gap in getting PTAs interested in making that move. And again, we're going to break all of this down and talk about good fits and what your program looks like and what sets you apart. We're going to really dive into some of these topics. But sometimes as a profession, we just haven't pushed that forward yet, and
Right.
it's
Other
there.
professions have, but we just haven't necessarily made it easy. And I think it's very doable, and there are some programs doing it and making it easy to go from an associate's degree to a doctoral degree. There's ways to do it, but it hasn't been easy.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I like that you have recognized that and acknowledge it because I think it's important for us to continue to look at that and to continue to see how this evolves as we progress through the profession here. So, especially with some of the data, like you said, that's coming out, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but we need PTs. So,
We do. We
yeah,
do.
definitely. So, well, before we dive into any of these topics, because we have so much to talk about, I would like for you to tell our audience a little bit about you, who you are, and
Sure.
how we got to where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Erin Forekleas, and I've been a physical therapist now for about 20 plus years. And I first got into education as being a DCE for a PTA program. And then the program director had moved on to something else. And then I was a PTA program director for 9 years. I learned a lot about PTA education, a lot about PTAs and DPT education, especially 20 years ago. We didn't do a good job teaching PTs or future PTs what PTAs are, what they can and can't do. So I really felt over the period of 9 years working in a PTA program, I fell in love with PTAs and started to ask the question, why don't we pull them into our profession more? Why don't we make an easier pathway for them to get an advanced degree? And maybe it's like yourself, getting a bachelor's and master's and moving on to education. Or for that percentage that want to become a doctor of physical therapy, can we make it easier? And I think as I started asking those questions, I realized I need to find out more about DPT education. So I started to work for a DPT program as faculty there. And then when I heard New England Institute of Technology was putting together this program, I really saw the opportunity to blend my passion of teaching physical therapy and finding an easier way to bring along our PTA colleagues to higher degree levels. If that's what their choice is, let's retain these skilled professionals in our profession and make it easier to be a DPT.
Now, something that you had mentioned to me, we do a lot of conversation back and forth through email and forms and whatnot before we get started. But you mentioned to me that you kind of have like a new zest for life, a new zeal for life. You see this student and faculty relationship as a mentor relationship. So what can you describe to the audience, like why you've kind of changed your perspective on that a little bit or gained a new perspective maybe?
Yeah, I'm so excited for this new program, and I do believe it's filling a need where we can take our colleagues, PTAs, faculty in the DPT program are DPTs, but this is our colleagues, our PTAs that we in theory work with in clinical practice and in the education arena routinely. So this is a way to be more of that mentor, that guide on the side. They've already elected to be in this profession of physical therapy. We all treat patients. There's so much similarity. So we're just mentoring and guiding our colleagues, our peers, to come along for those that are choosing to be a DPT. And we know PTAs shine in DPT education. They're notoriously the top performers, and we know this anecdotally, but also through some research that PTAs come well prepared for DPT school. They're the most prepared. So the thought of having a classroom of PTAs going on to DPT, we can make some assumptions of some shared knowledge and work in more of that relationship of colleagues and mentors than perhaps the traditional I'm the professor and I'm going to tell you what's important, because they're already members of our profession.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way to kind of think about it. So, we're not starting from scratch with these students. They bring in a ton of experience from the
Yes.
clinic, and some of them have managed different areas of their facilities before. So they're bringing in a ton of information. And you might have some that are pretty fresh that just
Yeah.
worked a couple years as a PTA, and that's possible. But you might have somebody who's kind of like a career veteran PTA that would choose to take this route, huh?
Yeah. And depending on continuing education, the area of specialty, and where they work, these individuals have skills that any of us on faculty may not have, just depending on where they took their career as a PTA. So I think there'll also be a lot of learning is for everyone, and we're all adult learners. There'll be a lot of back and forth from peer to peer, and then from faculty to peer, both to PTA, both ways. So it'll be a really collegial environment, and we're looking forward to seeing all the knowledge and skills these PTAs are bringing in and then building off of that versus sort of starting from ground zero.
Great. So we're going to kind of lump our conversation today into like three big areas of interest, or three big topics. And you and I kind of like pre-worked some of this out, like what this might look like. But we're going to talk about pathways for PTAs who want to advance within their profession, what that looks like, current and future workforce needs. And then we're going to talk a little bit about hybrid education. And what this looks like for a PTA who's wanting to come into DPT education. And we're really lumping, like we're kind of painting with a broad brush here on some of these topics, but you're going to dive in a little bit deeper and kind of, give us a little more details and information specifically about how New England Tech can really connect these PTAs to what their future goals are. So
Absolutely.
All right, so let's get started here. The first topic, we're going to kind of talk more about that pathway for the PTA here, okay? So, what makes New England Tech, and we're kind of shortening it,
Yep.
New England Institution of Technology, right?
Yes.
So, New England Tech, just to make it roll off the tongue a little bit easier here. But what makes New England Tech a good pathway program for PTAs?
Yeah, New England Tech is really an institution that looks at what are the community needs and can we make pathways for students to get good quality jobs. And we have a nursing arm that can come in and become an LPN, an associate trained RN, or a bachelor's, master's, even up to a family nurse practitioner. Really, the institution values being able to bring individuals along where you can stop at any point and enjoy a great career, or if you want to go on to perhaps something higher in your field of interest, you can continue on in a cost-effective and more sort of seamless way that brings along the education you've already gotten. So for New England Tech, it seemed like a great fit. They have a CODA program to an MSOT and the nursing arm that I talked about. And so we have a robust PTA program that's just going through its 10-year accreditation now. So the reaccreditation, been around for a while. And it made sense to bring a DPT program here for those PTAs that want to advance. And how can we help individuals do it in a cost-effective and efficient way? And so it seemed like a great fit, and we're really excited to be connected to New England Tech, to build this program, and to have this opportunity for those on this half of the country. It's one of the first programs on the East Coast, so it'll be nice to have a bridge program on over here on this side.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm from Ohio, so I'm from the state that had the original
Yes,
bridge
yes,
program, Finley, which was obviously a map for a lot of programs to kind of look at and see. And of course, there's still a thriving program as well. But for a long time, that was the only program. That was the only bridge program. So people were coming from all around. So now
absolutely.
there's a handful more. I think 4 accredited.
Yes,
And
yes.
then of course your program's coming on and might be maybe 1 or 2 other ones. I'm not 100% sure, but
Yeah, I think there might be another program or two. I think there's really a call and a need to just make it an easier pathway.
definitely. So speaking of the pathway, there's something that's a little unique about your program in that, anybody who's looked into this, you have to have a bachelor of or a bachelor's degree before you can apply to traditional DPT program or bridge DPT program. So what is the unique pathway that you have there at New England Tech that's making this much more interesting for PTAs?
Yeah, the DPT program and having all PTAs in a cohort is great, but we also knew kind of the secret to help move the PTA along was what happens from that associate's degree to the bachelor's degree to then apply to the DPT program. So an individual can have an associate degree, the PTA degree, and come to New England Tech and do about a year's work of bachelor work to get that bachelor's degree to get into the DPT program. And what we do is you apply once and get accepted to both programs. We modeled it off of sort of a 3+3 direct entry DPT program where it's a college freshman in 3 years, you get your undergrad done, and then you roll into the professional phase of the DPT program. So we look at your transcript. Every PTA program has slightly different courses. And then we create an individualized plan that includes all of the prereqs that you need to get into DPT school, your physics, your chemistry, your biology, and your A&P. Match that with what you've already taken. And then in about a year's time, everyone comes with slightly different credit loads and requires slightly different. But we've designed it that in a year, you'll be just shy of a bachelor's degree. And I think what makes the real special that saves time and money, essentially, if we get right down to it, is that your last 2 terms, we're a quarter system program, are your first 2 terms in DPT education. So those 29 credits are DPT education that can count towards conferral of your bachelor's degree.
Wow.
So after term 2 in the DPT program, then you're awarded the bachelor's degree. And it's just like those 3+3 direct entry from high school that are going to go to a college, do about 3 years of undergrad, and then about 3 years of the DPT grad program. So we tried to really streamline that process. So they don't have to go to a 4-year institution and start all over. We can honor the credits you bring in with your PTA education. And maybe you've taken a few other gen eds while you were figuring out what you wanted to be. If those are gen eds that you can apply towards a bachelor's degree, we'll use them, fill the gap, and accept you into the DPT program at the same time. You just have to maintain that 3.0 when you get to the DPT program, but you kind of apply once and get the bachelor's and the DPT degree.
Sounds like you're making this pretty easy.
That's the goal. And that's kind of when I realized, as that PTA educator, I was sending many of my students, and I worked as a PTA educator. I was out in Utah for a period of time. I'm now in Massachusetts. And I would send students or recommend going to Ohio because they were the only game in town. And I just kept thinking there's probably an easier way to retain PTAs. And then I found some graduates were leaving the profession. It was almost easier to go be a health professional in a different field. And that didn't seem good for us as a profession. So that's the goal, is to make it efficient and have you come out as an excellent DPT, but to make it cost effective and time efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of a student, and we're going to talk more about hybrid later, but like what kind of a PTA, how do I say this? What kind of a professional PTA who's already a working individual that's going to be a student now, like what kind of PTA should consider this type of program? Who would want to consider this?
That's a good question, because again, not all PTAs want to become a DPT. For those individuals that are thinking about it, there's lots of different types of PT programs, because we know PTAs can go to any DPT program. You just get that bachelor's degree like we were talking about. And there's lots of different variations. But again, with this bridge, you're with all PTAs. So what we've been able to do is sort of drop some credits, make it on the lower end, because we honor some of what you're bringing, some of your skills you're bringing in as a PTA, and then we've made it hybrid. You still have some class, and we'll talk about that later, but it also allows some flexibility to work and still see patients. So an individual who can drop off of full-time, because it's really hard to have 2 full-time jobs. So if you're a PTA, you want to maintain your employment as a PTA wherever it is you live in this country. Perhaps with your working with your employer, you can drop your hours to that's comfortable for you going through DPT school, and then you can maintain some employment while you're going to DPT school. We'll have lots of cases, and we'll be talking about current patients that you're treating, because again, we'll have a classroom of all DPT or PTAs that are going to this DPT level. And then you can live anywhere. The program's located in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, which if you're not from the area, everyone kind of knows Providence. We're just a little bit from Providence, and you would fly into that Providence airport, and we're about 10, 12 minutes from the airport. And then you would come in 7 times throughout the program for a week, and we'll be doing lab skills. So all of your lab activities get clumped all at the end of a term. Okay. And so you can learn from where you are, work as a PTA part-time, and then if that sounds like a balance that you want, and then you would come out to Rhode Island at designated time periods throughout the program to do those hands-on labs. So it may allow for that flexibility of employment, staying at home. I know lots of PTAs, you have a profession, a career, you've got roots, you live and maybe expecting, you live near your work and you're expecting to stay with an employer. Maybe as you become a DPT, maybe they're helping you with tuition or being flexible. We don't want that individual to have to uproot and leave. So you could stay where you are. You just have to come to East Greenwich. And then you have to be okay a little bit with learning remotely. We'll have synchronous and asynchronous times. So if you feel comfortable doing some stuff via remote, we'll be creating learning communities just like you do in person, but you're open to that alternate way of taking in information. I think this program would be perfect for you.
Great. And we'll talk a little bit more about the hybrid, and we might be able to break down some of those distinctions between synchronous and asynchronous coming up here in a little bit. But it sounds like these pathways that we're talking about, New England Tech has tried to they're trying to remove as many barriers as we possibly can. Now, we're still in our in our stage in the profession, we are still viewing this as accreditation for an associate's degree and accreditation for a DPT. So right now there's no accreditation in between there for a bachelor's or master's degree, right? So that's what we're working within. So it's not like we have the ability, and I say we, I'm talking about education as a whole, can't just go out there and create a accredited bachelor's or master's degree program. That's not an option. So you think of our colleagues in nursing who can come in at multiple different entries. That's not something that we can do right now in PTA or PT education. So what you guys are doing is trying to remove as many barriers as you can within that structure, right?
Exactly.
You know, you're working with what you have to work with, because you can't just go and change accreditation standards.
Right. So we're trying to say, okay, given that, and what are the common pitfalls that I've heard as a PTA educator? And I had lots of excellent students in DPT that were PTAs, and some of their pathways required extra courses, almost doing like 5 years, because they would do their associate's degree and then have to re-get a bachelor's, not have most of those credits transfer. And it's like, you just did more than one straight out of high school. And you've
Right.
got a lot of knowledge on physical therapy. So it just wasn't easy. And we're trying to make it easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I can appreciate that. So,
Yeah, you know?
and go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the PTAs that want to advance, they want to stay connected to the profession also while they're in the profession, while they're going through schooling. So can we just make it more direct so they can stay in our profession?
And that's important. And the reason why that's important is because of the next topic that we're going to talk about. And that's the current and the future workforce needs, right? So, you know, we keep talking about this, and I'm sure that there are people who are listening who are like, it's not something that they're interested in, or they may have already shut the episode off at this point. Who knows? I don't know. But it is important for several reasons. I mean, APTA just put out some data a couple months ago about the projected workforce shortages for physical therapists, right? Yes. So, you know, my question has been, and I've had some conversations with some PTA colleagues that are into research and PTA education, is why haven't we made this easier yet? We have all of these PTAs who, many of them would love to advance their degrees. Many of them are happy with where they are. And again, we have acknowledged that, and that's okay. Yep. Totally fine. But we know that we have these shortages coming up. So again, New England Tech is trying to remove some of those stops or some of those barriers that we know that exist, in order to make this as seamless as possible and as streamlined as possible for that PTA who's like, yes, this is what I want to do.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're kind of doing that. But so what else is so important about this, that we need to address these future needs?
Yeah, because as that report came out, I believe it was January in PTJ, looking at the projected need, I kind of have it up on the screen in case we referenced it. And they were looking at the shortage that we have and are going to continue. That shortage of physical therapists will grow. And this report projected through 2037. So we're seeing that if we won't have enough physical therapists to fill these positions, in medicine, you sometimes see other professions will take over or come in to fill that gap. We want to keep our scope, and we're growing our scope in some ways in a very positive direction. But we have these workforce shortages, and we can't meet the needs of populations. That doesn't reflect well on our profession, while we're trying to, if anything, grow our scope of practice. So NEIT being very connected to workforce needs and employment, and having a long history of rich collaboration with local employers and national employers, saying, boy, employers are coming to NEIT wanting to support PTAs that they have to this DPT degree. And so when we began the needs assessment study years ago, it was almost organic, because employers were coming saying, we'll support PTAs. In fact, some employers are sponsoring some tuition, or will pay a portion of tuition if you commit to your first 2 years of employment as a DPT with them. There's lots of creative stuff happening because of this workforce shortage, and it's only going to grow. So if we can cultivate and retain within our profession and get them to that doctoral level for those that want to as efficiently as possible without, we're still a DPT program teaching to all of the accreditation standards, and we think we're going to have excellent graduates with a good skill set, but we're doing it by taking down some of those traditional barriers. 27 months, a student can obtain that DPT degree and get back into the workforce, because that's the goal. And so that's why we're kind of taking down the barriers, and that really brings back to the why NEIT, because they're very driven by workforce needs and meeting needs, so students can get out and get that job. And PT is on the list now.
27 months.
Yes.
To those listening who are like, man, I don't know, like the time commitment, 27 months. Yes. And that's of course, if you have your bachelor's degree, but we've already described that you have a pathway to get people in quicker to finish that bachelor's degree. So just keep that in mind. And the other thing that I want to highlight that you just talked about was possibly employers giving some kind of tuition reimbursement or paying for this type of program or something like that. So if there's PTAs that are listening who are considering this, ask your employer, like, is this something that you can support me to do? Even if it's a small percentage, even if there's a way that you have to work for them for a certain amount of time, but there is assistance out there. And the worst they can say is no, but what's the best that could happen? They say yes. Right?
And we're having some employers come to us now that they know, and especially in the New England area, word of mouth, we're getting out there now as we're getting closer to taking that first cohort. And we also have employers on our advisory board, and employers are asking us, how can we support our internal PTAs? And I always say, give them flexibility, because PT school's hard. You went through it too, so they need flexibility, and then funding, because it's a cost. So local employers, I had one recent employer say, and of course this is this individual, but we can assume this is happening. He's had an open ad for PTs for over 6 months here in New England in the outpatient clinic, and he's like, I have excellent PTAs. I will support them because then it's sort of a guaranteed good quality employee later as the PT. So I think employers are realizing there's an incentive for them as well.
That's great. And I think that something that we've highlighted a lot through this conversation is that we're not talking about a traditional program in the sense that in your traditional programs, that student has a lot to learn still about the healthcare profession. They're still very fresh to the whole healthcare landscape and environment. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that's a great place to be. So fun to learn all of that stuff fresh. But in this program, it's so unique because these people that are coming in, these PTAs, already have a knowledge of the landscape. They are coming in with skills. We are talking about people who might have been, in this career for 5, 10, maybe plus more years that would be coming into this program. So they already have some of this background knowledge and whatnot. So why do you think that it's important to, because we want to talk a little bit about your faculty, like why is it important for these PTAs that are coming in to kind of understand that faculty structure in your program and what exactly that's going to do for them?
Yeah, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there. We know the skill sets that PTAs have. We know the rigor of education for PT schools, and they're out there practicing. So you've introduced yourself to patients. You know how to document because you're documenting. You've seen a few probably different documentation systems. You've been in multiple settings through your PTA education and maybe your career as a PTA. So we get to kind of get to the good stuff a little quicker because we know you've done that before. And so that allows the program to be shorter. It allows our credits to be a little bit lower. And then it makes it this really efficient sort of 27-month program. But also we know the PTAs are coming and you have important information because you've already been through PT school. You understand the profession. And so we've really got an A team of faculty that have a broad specialty areas, because as a PTA, you might be coming in knowing, I want to go back and work in acute care. And so we have a cardiopulmonary and acute care specialist, and she's going to be the one that's doing simulations, and that's really making sure if that's your area of interest, not only do you have the generalist skills that you need to be a DPT, but we can dive a little bit deeper if that's your area of interest, that's your practice setting. For individuals who work in neuro rehab, that's an area of my specialty and another faculty's specialty. We also have research going in all of our areas of specialty, and sometimes as a PTA, that's like an unknown or a scary part. And how much research do you have to do? I know I was nervous as a student on research. So this gives them tangible ways to do some applied research in your area of expertise. So I think really we're able to have this dynamic faculty because we know as PTAs coming back to physical therapy school, you value that and you come with interests and research interests, practice interests, and expertise in some areas. And you might plan on continuing in that area. So we want to elevate you perhaps in those areas, even past what would be entry level. So we'll really be able to tailor some stuff towards your areas of interest.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I mean, yeah, as a PTA coming in, especially somebody who's maybe been in the field for a while, they might have specific questions about specialties and achieving that and different certifications and some of those things that will give you good return on investment. And, so they're going to be drilling down a little bit more than maybe your traditional student would. And so kind of have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, we expect them to be more knowledgeable, asking more questions because hindsight's 2020. And what do we always say after you go through something? Boy, if I did that again, I might do something differently. It's kind of they're coming back for more physical therapy education, so we expect them to be more knowledgeable and ask more questions or want that faculty that specializes in a particular area. One of our faculty members, he's finishing a fellowship in orthopedics and he did a residency. And so we know a lot of individuals work in musculoskeletal, outpatient orthopedics, and he's an example and can help guide those that might be interested in some of these additional pathways, even post DPT. And he will bring those skill sets to the classroom. And knowing we've got a classroom of PTAs, we all know our basic range of motion and goniometry, we can get a little quicker into some of those hands-on skills, those manual skills, those advanced skills that you want to develop as a PTA to use in practice. So we're excited because we've really tried to get a faculty that are diverse and that have those specialty areas that we know as a PTA you might be more looking for in your faculty.
Yeah, I think, I think back to like my first year of PTA school, which was a really long time ago at this point in time. But, words like fellowship wasn't something I was thinking about or, board certification. Like I wouldn't have known anything about that. But now, like if I came into a DPT program now, I would have a lot of questions on this kind of stuff. But, at that time when I graduated a million years ago, it wasn't something that was ever on my mind,
Right. Right. And I think that's what will make it interesting too for the students because they'll also learn from peers. Right. There's so many certifications and courses that PTs and PTAs take. You might have a peer that can tell you a little bit about what they're doing in their clinic and what they see PTs doing. And so I think it's going to really create this elevated learning community and we can all approach it as colleagues. Faculty happen to be at the DPT level and some beyond with residencies and fellowships so we can guide and mentor those individuals that perhaps want to go those different routes. But there's something to be said when you're all coming in and you're already colleagues, they're already in the profession. So we can kind of talk the physical therapy talk right from the beginning and have you ask those questions in a classroom and everybody in that room is going to be excited to hear the answer. It's just not that one PTA with a bunch of, new undergrads, which we've all been, I was one of them, we don't always have that foresight to ask the hard questions or the detailed questions. And we expect our classes will.
That's interesting. I have had, I have many friends who have went back to PT school after being a PTA. Some taken the bridge route and some have taken the traditional route. And it's interesting because the ones who've taken the traditional route often say, I don't want anybody in my class to know that I'm a PTA. I don't want the other students to know that I'm a PTA. I don't want the faculty to know that I'm a PTA, because there's this like, well, what if they think that I am going to be too much of a know-it-all, or what if they think that I should know something and I don't know something, and
Yes.
you're kind of like stuck in that in between, right? You know?
Yes. Well, and it's almost awkward. Or if you, one of my study buddies in college in PT school, she was a PTA. We're still friends so many years later, but she helped me a lot because she understood a lot that I just was like, oh, I don't get it. And her hands in lab, she just knew where to put her hands. And I quickly realized she knows a lot more than me, and learned she was a PTA. But yeah, it's kind of almost awkward. So this way we can all be on the same level. We're all PTAs. And just like PTs, we all have maybe habits that aren't the best. Maybe we do things our own little way that's not exactly one technique. And we're gonna acknowledge that. We're gonna talk about it. Techniques that are good, that are a little different, we'll share. If as you're advancing in your education, we could say, well, that's great, but here's a better way proven by research. But we're going to approach it in that collegial way, and learn from each other as well. So we're really excited to have that classroom. So then the PTA can be their authentic PTA self in the classroom along with everybody else. And just like our profession, our skill sets are really vast because we work in all different areas. So PTAs in the classroom will have strong skill sets in some areas, and others it'll be like, I haven't been in an ICU. I remember learning about it. And so we also know within the program, you're going to come with strengths, and we'll have our ortho folks show us some additional ortho stuff. And then in neuro, the tides will flip. And, those that are working inpatient may have some new tips and tricks that they can share with their peers. So,
Oh yeah. It sounds like such an exciting experience. I'm
this
kind
is
of
why I get so excited talking about it. I'm just looking forward to those conversations, those learning experiences. I think it's going to be really engaging.
I kind of like to think of it as like, and you said this, like almost like a second chance. And it's not again, and I don't want, of course, this is a podcast for PTAs. I'm 100% in support of PTAs, but, I think back at my time 20 some years ago in PTA school, and I knew I wanted to go into outpatient orthopedics, and that's what I wanted to do. And I already had my job lined up and all of this stuff, like all my ducks were in a row. And I don't think, I know, I did not give myself enough credit, or did not allow myself the opportunity to explore acute as much as I should have. And then years down the road, I had the chance to work in acute care, and I found that I really loved it. And I was like, why didn't I give this the time of the day? So now I think that this would be a really unique way to be like, now I can kind of dive into some things that maybe I haven't given myself the chance to really,
Exactly. And yeah, we all are. I've caught myself. All of us educators at some point are like, if I could go back and be a student again, I might do it a little differently, just knowing what I know now. So this is going back to school in physical therapy. And so, yeah, you can take some of that wisdom that you've gained by going through PTA school and apply it to PT school. And we're ready for that. And we're expecting that. And that's why we like to kind of talk like they're our colleagues, because we know you're coming in with skills, with opinions, with expertise in certain practice areas. Maybe you've been a PTA for a long time and you haven't been in an ICU or acute for 10 years. We understand that, and we'll get you there in those weak areas. And I think it'll just make for a collegial experience. It's going to be like a giant continuing education. It's still rigorous, and it's still DPT school, and I don't want to paint that DPT school's easy. PTA school's not easy, but for the classroom of peers, I think it can make the process more engaging and a little more focused, and hopefully really produces a strong PT.
Of course, yeah. And I have no doubt it will. So our last topic of conversation is hybrid education. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. Some people love it. Some people don't love it. And I think sometimes it gets a bad rap. But I completed my bachelor's degree almost completely in a online format. My master's degree was almost in a completely online. And of course, you mentioned these big words, synchronous and asynchronous. So what does a hybrid program look like for a PTA coming into this bridge program?
That's a great question, because hybrid and remote and sync, async, which is synchronous or async, there's a lot of terms out there, and really institutions can, and even down to the program level, can really decide what hybrid is. Traditionally in physical therapy education, and specifically at New England Tech, you will learn didactic information wherever home is for you or wherever you want to learn. And we have a quarter system at New England Tech. So we have 4 terms rather than, say, 3 traditional semesters, which works really good for the type of program we've designed. So for these 10-week terms, you'll learn didactic coursework for about 9 weeks, and that will be both synchronous and asynchronous. And what that means is maybe a class would meet 4 hours a week. It's a 4-credit class, and you would meet for 4 hours, just lecture for 4 hours. So maybe it'd be 2 2-hour classes. We're going to have some of that time synchronous, where we will all get on the computer at the same time. But some of that time will be asynchronous. So we'll record lectures, some of your readings, some of your group work you'll be doing asynchronously so you can build around your day. And when are you best? I'm sharpest in the morning, and after 8 o'clock, I don't know. My brain's not firing best. So I'd be someone that would want to do my work earlier in the day and maybe just see patients in the afternoon. Writing and getting into details is tough later in the evening for me. But the synchronous time will allow us to come together. And as we know in physical therapy, we're going to be talking about a lot of cases. There can be muddy points and tricky concepts. So our synchronous time will be very valuable and will be a lot of doing. It won't be us lecturing, because those can be recorded and you can do it your own time, and you can go back and re-listen to muddy points as much as you like. But during our time together, we'll application and apply everything that you've learned. We'll have cases. We'll do Zoom breakout rooms. We'll go over muddy points and solicit questions. So we'll be really effective with our time together. And that happens for those 9 weeks. And then you come on campus for lab. And so instead of having lab maybe for 2 hours a week for this class and 2 hours a week for that class, all that time is still the same lab hours, but they get compiled into 8-hour days. So you'll have 8-hour lab days. We'll do 4 hours, take a nice lunch break, and do 4 hours. Everyone comes in lab clothes the whole day. And we do these sort of lab immersives where we just do all of the lab content. Now, during the didactic, we talked about the skills. Maybe you've even practiced or watched videos. So it's not teaching and lecture based when you come on. It's doing and practicing those lab skills and applying. And we'll have simulation, we'll have standardized patients, we'll have patients that have the conditions we're talking of. So it'll be a real just lab-oriented time. And then you get a little break between terms, and then you kind of do it again.
So did you say that it was 7 times?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So there's 7 times. So over the course of the program, there's really like 11 terms or sessions, if you will. And so most of your terms in the beginning, out of the first 8 terms, 7 of those you'll come out for that last week. Then the last 3 terms are your internships. So your internships, you're not coming to Rhode Island at all unless you live in Rhode Island or want to do an internship in that area. And you'll do an internship wherever in and around your geographic area of where you call home. And so we'll find 3 different clinical experiences for you, with one really trying to be in your area of most interest. And maybe that's a more advanced specialty area, but we're making generalists, so you'll get exposure to acute or some type of inpatient, some outpatient in your specialty area. And so those are the last 3 terms. So they're 3 10-week internships. And those will operate very similar like it did in PTA school. We have to have so many hours. We've kept our internships on the shorter side. So that way we know you've already been exposed and you've introduced yourself, so we can kind of move forward a little quicker. But it'll be 3 10 weeks, and those are the last 3 terms.
Great. Can you describe a little bit more about the curriculum? Like what exactly, what are we going to be learning?
Yeah.
What are these PTA students going to be learning to become DPT?
Yeah. And it's so exciting because the classroom's full of PTAs. So we designed all of this for just you, the PTA that's coming back to DPT school. A few key threads. What we've done is the first pretty much 3-4 terms, are our foundational skills. That's where you're going to get your anatomy and physiology. We get into movement and movement analysis. We're able to do that a lot quicker because you've had patients and you've considered movement before as PTAs. And some of the skills that you're going to apply in all of your classes, whatever system, all of your practice areas. And then as we move towards the end of the first year and getting into the second year, we start to focus on systems-based courses. So you'll have a PEDS course, you'll have a cardiopulmonary course, ortho, neuro, pelvic floor, and integumentary. So you'll have some of those more system courses will apply some of those foundational skills and your PTA skills that you've had to these system-based courses. And then we also have a service learning, and we're a community engaged really learning. We're physical therapy. We're showing up in as PTs in emergency departments. We're showing up in community health. We're starting to creep closer to where public health ends and healthcare, healthcare and public health. It's what happens when you kind of fall off the healthcare cliff, and how does public health and community health come in? And physical therapy is getting a larger footprint there. So we have a 4-course series where wherever your community is in your area and whatever community is important to you, you'll be doing some service learning and some community practice by putting together some community programs and kind of working in that area that we see a lot of growth in our profession. And I think as a PTA, individuals will know communities or populations to focus in on in their area, and you can really kind of make it what you're most interested in as an individual, as a healthcare provider in your local community. So I think that'll be really interesting. And then you go out on your clinicals, and we have all your clinicals clumped together at the end because we have a few ICE experiences along the way, but we, because you've already been out in the clinic, we don't have to get you out really early just to see. We know you understand the clinical setting. In this way, too, if you're employed, you'll kind of have a cadence for your first 8 terms, and then 9, 10, 11, the last 3 will be a new cadence with your clinical experiences.
So you said a word that I'm not sure every listener will understand, ICE. So what
Yes,
can you
great.
explain
Thank you.
ICE is?
Sorry.
No, that's
Yeah,
okay.
integrated clinical experiences. So DPT programs have to integrate, and CAPTE says, our accreditor that accredits PT and PTA programs, says you can't introduce the clinic all at the end. You have to start having them see and experience. So it's known as ICE, which is integrated clinical experience. And so we'll have those, but sometimes those are larger clinical experiences, like putting the clinical midway through. We don't have to because you've been introduced to the clinic, and then we'll do some smaller ICE experiences, integrated clinical, and then we'll put your long affiliations all at the end. I think for planning purposes and the working professional, and then you have all the didactic knowledge, so we can send you and have you use all of your skills on each of those clinicals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So another question that I think people would probably have for you, because we've mentioned it a few times, you are a new program, right?
Yes.
So what would you say to the listener who's thinking about your program and is like, man, this sounds like it's going to be a great fit. I think that this could be something that works for me, but it's a new program. So like, what would you say to ease the minds of someone who is considering doing this, but is maybe a little bit nervous that we're talking about a brand new program?
Yeah, it's brand new. And so for accreditation for all PT and PTA programs, they all follow the rules of CAPTE and their process. And so we're marching through that initial accreditation. So we're not fully accredited. CAPTE does not accredit programs until they are the term before they graduate their first cohort. They come out and evaluate, and then they usually grant accreditation around when that first cohort is graduating. So, but we're moving through the process, and it's called the candidacy process. So we submitted our report, it's been reviewed, and it's at the level where now CAPTE will send a team out to come and assess. They're going to come out actually in July, so next month, kind of kick the tires. Yeah, we're excited because we get to show off our beautiful building and facilities where we have these advanced simulation labs and lots of PT and OT shared lab space that I think most individuals are really impressed when they come on campus. So we'll show CAPTE that. And then they'll give us candidacy when they meet in October. They may put on some stipulations. We want you to improve in this area or see more development in that area. And then we can take our first cohort. which will start in January. That's when our courses start, January of 26, and then it'll be every January thereafter. And then they'll come back out, like I said, before we graduate that first cohort. And that's when we would get initial accreditation. Now, nothing's guaranteed with accreditation. And so because of that, and because you need to graduate from a CAPTE accredited program to sit for licensure, there's a statement where any individuals that are in that first cohort, regardless of what happens with their accreditation status, will qualify to sit for the exam so that that first group isn't penalized. Now, we don't expect to have a delayed initial accreditation. We are meeting all metrics well above any set standard, but we're not fully accredited. So you can rest easy in the sense that we're marching through and we communicate out each phase to our prospective students so that you can see and that we're moving through the process. And you can know that you'll be able to sit for that licensure exam sort of regardless of if that initial accreditation is delayed because there isn't the need to penalize the students. And then you can go to CAPTE and learn more about the accreditation process, and that might help you understand it a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think that all of the things that you said are really important for someone who's considering this to understand that CAPTE takes this very serious. So like if you've made it to this point in the process, you've done your due diligence. Otherwise yes. You wouldn't be to the point where you're getting ready to start accepting applications and whatnot. So
correct.
It is a step-by-step process. It's lockstep. There's nothing necessarily unique about what your program has done in regards to applying for accreditation versus any other PT or PTA program. You're following the steps. So
yeah, these are their steps. And that report has been reviewed, and that's really where we get into all the weeds of exactly our program. We have to share all of the accreditation, all of the curriculum, and meet all of their accreditation standards. And so we share how we're going to meet those rigorous standings. CAPTE is known as being rigorous. That report was submitted, is in good enough standing. Then now we advance to a site visit and someone coming out, and then they'll, review that. So it's a long process, but it's also good because CAPTE makes sure that programs are hitting key benchmarks to benefit the public and the students. So we're following the process and coming through with flying colors, and we'll continue to update everyone as we move through the process so that everybody applying and coming and in the program can feel in the know about how the accreditation is moving forward, so it's not a question mark.
Yeah. And as someone who just recently went through reaccreditation, I can appreciate where you are right now. It is a process. It is a good process. It's hard. It's tough. It's a lot, but it really makes you as an educator pay attention to what you're doing. I think it's a nice checks and balance system. If you think about when you were in the clinic, working with your patients, how do we know that we're doing the right things? How are we checking and balancing? And what are our outcomes? And what does that look like? And are our patients getting better? Same thing. We're looking at how's our program? What's the health of our program? What can we do better? How are our students performing? How are we as faculty performing? So there's a lot of things that go into it. And while it is a big process, it's a process that I can appreciate why it's there. And you're right. It is known to be one of the more rigorous standards out there in education. So
yeah, I think all the administration I interact with, wow, CAPTE is pretty specific or pretty rigorous. And I always say, yep, but that means we're going to have a great quality program. And that means when you go and get physical therapy care as the greater public, that we're having high standards. And so it's good for us as a profession. It's a little laborious when you're working on this, but also it does give assurance to students if they're following through the process and you keep getting the green light and moving through the process, like in initial accreditation or continuing up with accreditation, that students know they're going to have a program that will meet these high standards. So that's, I think, assuring as a consumer of the program and then a public having physical therapy services.
Absolutely. Erin, this has been wonderful. We've covered a lot of ground, I think. So a couple of things before we go. First, I'm going to ask you one last big question, and then we're going to talk a little bit about application to your program and where people can
Right.
learn more. But first, if there's one thing that the audience can take from this, or if there's any last words of advice or encouragement that you want to leave us with, what would that be?
If you want to continue on to a bachelor's or further education, and if a DPT program is what you see in your future, do look to find one that's designed for PTAs. They can be more cost effective, they can be faster, and specifically they're designed for you. And so really look around, find a program that works for you. But I think when you have a classroom of PTAs, the feedback from those PTAs is they really felt valued. And so I think being in a classroom of peers is important. So look into different programs. I think bridge programs can save time and money, and then give you that peer to peer learning that is also really valuable. So I would say, look at the bridge programs, check out NEIT, and you'll find that it's really tailored, I think, more to you as a PTA than just any person thinking about being a DPT. So my advice would be look at those programs in depth because they really are tailored to you.
Yeah. Ask those important questions.
Absolutely.
It's like trying on a pair of running shoes, right?
Yeah.
Try on a couple of different pair of shoes and see what fits your foot best, right?
Yeah.
But if you're interested in being with a group of other PTAs and you're interested in some of those barriers removed, I think it's a great idea for some of our listeners to think about New England Institution of Technology. It's so
Yeah.
much.
It
And
is. That's why we'll change it to New England Tech to kind of shorten it up a little bit. But yeah, our goal is to get you to where you want to go in a cost effective and time efficient pathway while still giving you an excellent education. Just like you said, getting rid of some of those barriers, they're almost artificial barriers. And we're just trying to be creative to say, well, that barrier doesn't have to be there if we're tailoring this specifically to this population. So, here the PTAs are put first versus just these are general individuals with a bachelor's degree. And I think that's kind of the secret sauce is it's tailored just to that PTA who wants to get in, get a good education, but get back out into the profession that they're already a part of.
Mhm. Yeah, I love it that you asked the big questions and you said, why can't we do it this way?
Yeah.
But why not? But what if we did it in a different way? So thank you
Yeah.
for your creativity. I appreciate that. So where can our listeners go to find out more information about New England Institution of Technology's hybrid bridge to DPT program?
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot, but they can go to New England Institute of Technologies. You can go to our webpage. And in fact, if you plug in PTA to DPT Bridge and then put New England Tech, it'll come right up. And then we have a specific page that'll outline you can meet the faculty. All the faculty are listed there. All of our admissions requirements are listed there. My contact information is there. You can email me directly as well. My email is my first initial E, last name Forekleas, F as in Frank, ARACLASNEIT, New England Institute of Technology. It's abbreviated .edu. But again, you can find that on the webpage. You can also find us on PTCast. PTCast system is where all DPT programs, all but 12, I'm told, of 300 and something use PTCast. It's a central application system. We're on there. The new applications roll out for 26 in just about 2 weeks' time on June 16th. It opens, so you can apply directly to us on PTCast. Currently, you can find us on the directory and see some information on our websites there as well. And if you're applying to the bachelor piece, because you still need to complete that bachelor's degree, you can apply now. And again, you not only get accepted to the bachelor's program, we guarantee acceptance into, or you get accepted into the DPT program at that first cohort when you would finish that bachelor's piece. And that way you apply once, but you get into both programs. You just have to keep up your GPA as we have a 3.0 GPA requirement to get into the DPT program. But if you maintain that 3.0 during that bachelor component, you're automatically in and you have a seat. You know you have a seat once you are ready. So you can apply now for that through our website.
That's awesome. So, for anybody who is listening or has listened to this show ever before, always knows that I say just hit the start button. So, if you're somebody who's been thinking about this and you just don't really know, like, well, should I do it? Should I not? And you're leaning in, just hit the start button and start looking. As a PTA, I will say it over and over and over again, no matter which route you choose, but career growth isn't something that should be optional. It's something that's essential. You have to find a way to continue to evolve and elevate your career. And for a lot of PTAs, this might be the pathway for them. So don't wait too long. Hit the start button. It sounds like New England Institute of Technology is just waiting for all
We
of these
can't wait.
PTAs.
So much excitement, and we start classes in January.
Awesome. Erin, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I appreciate your time. Thanks for jumping on.
Thank you. This has been exciting, and thank you to everyone that's listening. Appreciate your time.
Of course. We'll have to give an update here in the future.
Will do, for sure.
All right. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to PTA Plus, the podcast for PTAs by PTAs. Subscribe, follow us on social, and share the show. Elevate yourself. This show is for educational purposes only. No clinical decision making should be made from its content. See you next time.